Here we go. Good evening, everyone. It is now 5:40, and it's time to call to order the workshop of the Victoria City Council. Our workshops are pretty informal, so with that, we'll dive right into our agenda. We've got two items on the agenda this evening. Our first item is a discussion with the Carver County Sheriff about policing services in Victoria and our partnership with them. Presenting this evening is Sheriff Camerood. Sheriff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I appreciate you giving me a few minutes of your time to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in policing locally here, but I'll also talk about what we're seeing a little bit statewide as well as in the nation. And you know, I think what you'll find is that we're not uniquely positioned here when we start talking about some of these things. You'll note that I'm calling this a policing detour, and I know you're aware of some operational changes that we've made, and I'm deliberately calling it a detour because, you know, if we shut down a stretch of Victoria Drive, a lot of people will follow the detour and it'll be just fine. But there will be some people who will be inconvenienced and they'll cut through neighborhoods, and that'll frustrate people, and it's kind of a painful thing. In an annoyance sort of way. And that's kind of where we're at. But it's also temporary, right? At some point, the road gets reopened and traffic patterns go back to the way they were. And that's where we're at on the policing bit. So I mentioned temporary. I noticed in your agenda report that it specifically mentions that we're going to highlight some temporary operational changes. And that's pretty significant. There is no intent to make any substantive changes to the policing model. This is a temporary scenario with the sole goal is to maintain service levels and be able to fulfill the contractual agreement that we have. And the idea is, historically, we have kept contract level or contract deputies and that pool of employees separate from base funded deputies, and we didn't mix and match because that leads to kind of this muddiness, if you will, related to the funding sources and who's paying for what and how do we know we're getting the same amount and so on and so forth. So in 2004, and we talked about this a few months back, in 2004, the county made a hard split between contract and base level funded employees. And that really is the cleanest way to honor our agreement with the city of Chaska. On October 11th, we started to kind of mix and match those resources a little bit, which will run through fourth quarter of this year and maybe a little bit into first quarter of next year. It kind of depends on the timing of employees finishing their field training. And as they cycle out into field training, that starts to free us up to move back to the standard operational practice. This is going to bridge a temporary scheduled staff shortage, which is different than vacancy shortages. We have had vacancies and we continue to hire. So we don't have vacancies. Today, what did we decide, Commander? 11 and a half vacancies today, which in and of itself is a very manageable number. The challenge for us is that we have a portion of those employees are in field training. And so that creates scheduling gaps. Which are different than, one's a management issue and one's an HR issue. And so we're managing a scheduling management issue. So what we did was we took the on-patrol time, which is the amount of time that an employee actually spends in a car, calculated that out, and then we assigned that to personnel to fulfill those obligations in the cities. So the deputies record their time spent in a city. We have our finance tech does all the math to make sure that the cities are getting the equivalent. To be clear, this is not a change to an hourly model. We're simply accounting for it by the hour for the accountability piece. On patrol time plugs in guaranteed minimums. right? And any shortages, if there are any, because we're keeping track, get a refund. Any overages, we don't bill. So you're saying, well, what does that mean to the city of Victoria? What's going on in the city of Victoria is you contract for 4 employees, and this is contained in your agenda report. Each employee works one of 4 12-hour shifts. There's a team 1 day and night and a team 2 day and night. If those employees take time off on the normal system, the city makes a decision. They can backfill the position at overtime at city's expense, or they can run the shift vacant. And then you just don't have that copy in town that night, which is not totally unheard of. On this current system, what we're doing is you have the exact same 4 employees in your city. You have the exact same squad cars they've been driving with the Victoria City graphics on it. They're providing 10 hours a day in the city of Victoria and 2 hours a day in the township or in the base level police services. Now, this is actually, some might argue, because those are guaranteed minimums, you're getting 10 hours. And by the way, if you contract for deputies like you do, they put in 10 hours a day on average. Because out of the 2,104 hours scheduled, they get sick, they go on vacation, they go to training, they take FMLA, all of that. And when you calculate that out, a 2184 employee works in the squad car, when I called it there, on patrol time, they work 1,836 hours in the car. Multiply that by 4, divide by 365, that's how many hours a day you get. It works out to be a little over 20. So we're given guaranteed minimum 20 hours a day using the same employees in the same car, doing the same job. In some ways you might say, well, this is actually better for us because now if somebody calls in sick, we backfill that at county expense because we're guaranteeing 10 a day. And on the old system, remember, if somebody called in sick, why then you had a vacancy or you paid at overtime. But in this scenario, we're filling that position. And you might say, well, why would you want to do that? Well, what that does for us is because we're picking up 4 hours a day through this flexibility in there, we're able to meet some of our needs elsewhere in the county with those 4 hours. But it's also why it has to be temporary, though, because if somebody calls in sick, I'm going to backfill it, and I'm going to do it at the overtime rate at county expense. And so I have to manage that as well. But so I'm really grateful for the flexibility that the city has granted in our ability to do this. But for the citizenry, because of the fact that we're staffing it the way it is, it really should be seamless. They should not be feeling or seeing anything, because now there are no days where you're not getting at least 20 hours of coverage. Our current situation, people say, well, how did it get to be this way? Why do you have so many in training and 11 vacancies? And so from 2019 to 2021, we've lost 5 to retirement. We cannot compete with para. When people are eligible, they're gonna take it, right? We've lost 9, they've just left policing. And over the last, dating back to the entirety of my career, the number of people who worked in policing for a couple of years and then left, that's just unheard of. It didn't happen. We've had 9 who have just gotten in and said, this job is not for me. I don't like working nights and weekends. I don't like being in the most unpopular career choice. And so we've had some that have gone back to, we had one young man, awesome cop, went back to landscaping and just said, I'd rather go back and do that. It was a better gig for me. We've been fortunate that we've had 3 that didn't want to be the cops anymore, but were happy to take other positions within the sheriff's office. And so we kept some in civilian positions. We have been hurt on the wage piece significantly by municipal agencies. And so this issue that we're facing is across the board, right? In fact, I just read an article today on NPR about the Great Resignation. The number of employees, they're just quitting. They're leaving. They're going to do other things with their life, and law enforcement is not exempt from that. And so we've lost some just straight up resignations, some that have left policing, municipal agencies. Because of all of those vacancies throughout the state, we've had cops who have left Carver County to go to municipal agencies mostly in Hennepin and Ramsey County for wages. They simply pay a lot more at those municipal agencies than Carver County does. We do exit interviews, and every one of those candidates was asked about it, and I think they were being pretty candid. They'd say, yeah, I really didn't like that supervisor, and I don't like this policy, but I wasn't going to quit over it. I quit because I can go there and make $7 an hour more. That's pretty substantial. What else can I say about that? We did lose 4 they just went home. I had a nice young deputy, Brandon Kowalski. I think he worked in town here for a while, and just a prince of a guy. Very good deputy. He was living on his granddad's farm in Blue Earth County. When we hired him, he continued to live there and commute up here to work. He went home. He still lives with his granddad on his granddad's farm, and now he's a Blue Earth County cop. You can't compete with that either. But those people that's pretty few and far between. And so that's kind of how the scheduling got there, because we've had that attrition that everybody's seeing. On the scheduling piece, because remember I said there's a split between the schedule HR piece and those two pieces. Compound that by we have employees throughout the office who have been deployed, maybe back in stateside this spring, and then they'll have a few months before they actually come back to work. We have some IOD, injury on duty. We end up with COVID-19 quarantine, creates vacancies in the schedule. And we've hired a lot of young people. Young people start families, they take FMLA. And all of those create voids in the schedule, which is kind of how we ended up where we're at. I threw this last bullet on here recently just to illustrate what's going on in Minnesota. There's 415 agencies law enforcement agencies in Minnesota between municipal, county, state, and then the other, which would be like Metro Transit would be an other sort of thing. Post Board estimates there's about 1,000 licensed law enforcement vacancies in Minnesota right now. So, map that out. That's more than 2 per agency, and many of those agencies are one police chief and a handful of part-time employees. And so we're challenged right now to find people. So the next logical question is, well, geez, Sheriff, what are you doing to try to get after this? And the first thing we did was we've been working with the County Board of Commissioners through the collective bargaining process, and explained this, shared this information with the board, and through the contract, the CBA, collective bargaining agreement contract that started, it was effective January 2021, was signed around June or July of 2021. So during that negotiation process, the Board of Commissioners kicked in some money that corrected the main issue with the pay structure, which was an inability to move through the scale. However, what we're seeing now with the continued departures is that it is largely too little too late. And I say that because as other agencies started to experience this, what they did was they upped their game on lateral hires. So it used to be, if you had 5 years of experience at Carver County and you were going to go work at some municipal agency in Hennepin County, they would start you somewhere other than on the bottom of the scale. And fast forward to today, they will start you where you would have been had you put those 5 years of service in at their agency, so that it's not totally foreign to come in at the top of the pay scale there. Well, here again, when we look at our employees, the county board made some bold movements and adjusted the collective bargaining agreement. But now the employees are saying, why should we wait to move through incrementally at Carver County when we can take our 5 years of experience and go to thus and such and start at the top? And that's what we're seeing. So we're going to continue to have those conversations with the board and try to bring them up to speed with what we're seeing, what we're facing, and then they'll have to make some decisions. At the end of the day, the sheriff doesn't set the pay for employees. The employees are employed and compensated by the County Board of Commissioners. And I'm going to try to help them make an informed decision, and they'll they'll work with me to figure it out. I'm very confident. So internally, though, people say, well, you got to do stuff internally. Well, internally, we're trying to get after some cultural things. We're civilianizing some positions where we can. So, for example, we took a vacant deputy position and converted it to a criminal analyst, which I really think is going to be a force multiplier. It's a data-driven situation where they're linking cases together throughout the metro as part of this metro regional consortium that is hosted by Hennepin County. But we can start linking crooks together. The idea is cut the head off the viper versus trying to just pick them off one at a time in Carver County. And other agencies, I've been told that the criminal analysts solve up to about 40% of their cases. The police still have work to do, but they link all the crooks together and help with the identification. And so I think that's a force multiplier for us. I want to make some additional professional development opportunities for employees. We've always had employee growth and development and those sorts of programs, but I think we can build on that. One example is typically if you get assigned to investigations, that's a 2-year assignment at a minimum. We might look at it and say, come on down for a month. You can dabble in it a little bit and see if you like it. And if you do, why then we could send you to some schools and build some skill sets, and maybe it turns into a longer assignment. But we're looking at that. Flexible scheduling. We know that today's workforce is different than mine in terms of work-life balance. And it was a city manager from Chanhassen really articulated it well, that these folks are making values-based decisions. They are saying that my time off and being with my family and coaching my kids t-ball or whatever they have going is more important than spending all my time at work chasing the dollar. And I can't fault them for that. But I also then, while trying to manage the affairs of the office, have to be willing to change and adapt to meet those values-based decisions. And we know that flexible scheduling is really important. And that's a little harder on a patrol schedule where he can't go home at 6 till I come in at 6, right? But if there's ways for us to make that stuff work, we sure are going to try to do that. Working with human resources to try to really unlock the alternate labor pools. There aren't enough people entering into law enforcement today. And so it's really about how can we get more people to come into this as a career choice. And we're trying to find ways to tap into that. We've done that with cadet program. I think I've talked about that here, where we'll hire somebody and pay them to go to school and provide them with the school to get peace officers licensure. We're going to continue to do that. I think we're going to double down on it. We just had a meeting earlier today on how many do we really think we can start in August when we do another one. But that's kind of what we really got to get after, creating a promotional job class. We know that employees today, more so than previous generations, really want to know, a connect the dots type career. What's the next step? What do you do? And so we will look to build it might still be in the deputy job class, but it might be a step up deputy 1 or master deputy or so, whatever you call it. And it's, if you have thus and such certifications, maybe you're standardized field sobriety, maybe you're a crime scene technician, maybe you've been a field training officer, why then you are eligible to compete for this promotional position. You're still a deputy, but you're at a higher level than a general deputy. So that's kind of where we're at. From our contract partners, again, I really want to say thank you for having the flexibility or granting us the flexibility with the scheduling. I think that's been very helpful. I think as we look to go a little bit further down the road, I think we ought to be figuring out how we can continue that, the flexibility in the patrol schedule. I'll try to figure out what that would look like, and I'll be sure to talk that through with the city manager. And that's it. I think if you have any questions or comments, I would be happy to field those now.
Terrific. Thank you, Sheriff. Council, questions for Sheriff Camerood and his Commander Willeen here.
I have a question. You talked about the 11.5 vacancies, and didn't really paint a pretty picture in terms of where the law enforcement market is today in terms of attracting new talent, right? For the reasons you stated, right? So how long? One, how many people are in the field training of the 11.5? Two, how long do you estimate it will take to bridge that gap, given the lack of talent coming into law enforcement?
Fair question. There are 0 in field training in that 11.5. That 11.5 is vacant.
Okay.
There's nobody allocated to that FTE. And for historical purposes, because we have 80 licensed, 11.5 is not an unmanageable number for us. We've been here before. Where we haven't been here before is the numbers in field training. Is it 7 today?
So there's currently 5 in patrol embedded in field training through different phases, mostly towards the end, and then we have 2 that are behind that and started with their in-office training. And so with that overlap there, that upon successful completion of those in field training, that those coming out of the initial office training will then cycle into the patrol car for field training purposes. And so right now we're on track for 3 of those 5. A couple of them are, just like 2 weeks behind from when they start from the others. But we're on track for 3 of those 5 to successfully complete field training, certified solo patrol by Christmas. Again, we're on track as they come into some final eval things. If determined they need just a little bit more fine tuning with someone in the car with them, then we'll make that decision to afford them that more time. But certainly we're on track with that to have 3 more out, and then those 2 coming out of the opposite cycle. So we're able to effectively manage just with the number of field trainers that we have, recognizing that the more we train, you can encounter a little bit of burnout with some of your trainers as well, and certainly being mindful of that. So we found generally 5 to 6 is manageable, where they're actually embedded with another deputy in the course of training on the street.
Anything else?
The second part of your question was the time frame on it, and I think Commander Willeen hit on that a little bit. We'll turn out a couple around Christmas time, so that would be 3, and then 2 more would follow within the coming weeks. And I think, depending upon how the staffing shakes out, we may be able to go back to the old practices shortly thereafter. My goal is to not run this past first quarter, and but it's a moving target. I just talked to the mayor last week, and she asked how many vacancies we're at, and I told you the number that it was last week, and I had employees start today. So it moves around quite a bit.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that process. So by the time they hit you for training, have they been through some kind of peace officers training, and then they come into Carver County system, and then they have a period of time that they're training with your officers? Is that how that works?
Yes, Minnesota is one of only 2 or 3 states that has a requirement that the candidate go to school on their own, attend skills. You might think of it like police academy, where you learn to drive a car and use handcuffs and that kind of stuff, right? And then they take the licensure exam, the post exam, and if you pass, then you become eligible to be licensed. And that is when you can start applying for jobs. And then they come to us, and now we train them in how we do it at Carver County, right? Because the stuff you learn in school is very general. It's broad strokes, general preparation. And then we teach the more nuanced how we do things here. And that is a pretty significant barrier to entry for some people. Other states would hire somebody and kind of have an on-the-job training, and then maybe they go to some state certified schooling at some point in their first year or first 18 months of employment. Minnesota used to do it that way until 70s, something like that. And then they went to this model that we have today. But that barrier to entry is making it a little bit harder, which is why we run the cadet program. So we can hire people and they have a job and we send them to school while they're doing the job.
So how long, is it individualized per employee, or it's a 6-month training program once you hire?
If they come to us eligible to be licensed, it takes a few months to get in the door because we'll do a couple of interviews, right? And that takes a few weeks to get through those because you come to the first interview. You don't know if you're coming to the second interview till we've tallied the scores from the first, right? So it takes a few weeks to get through that. Then we give them a background packet. Background investigations take roughly 45 to 60 days. So you're 2 months into that process. If they pass the background, then we invite them to go to the pre-placement psychological and the pre-placement physical. Well, as you can imagine, every agency in the state is hiring. There are 2 main pre-employment psychological service providers, so they're booked solid. So it takes 2, 3, 4 weeks to get an appointment with them. And then by the time you get that, they have 10 days pursuant to our contract with our provider. They have 10 business days to get us the written report. We'll read the report and then we make the final, please start on thus and such day. Well, if they already have a job, they have to give a 2-week or a 30-day notice to their current employer if they want to leave in good standing. Well, when you add all that up, it's 6 months. And then they come to us, now they're in the door, and it's scheduled for 16 weeks is the training, but we train to standard. So if we hired somebody who had been a cop in Minnetonka for 5 years, that employee might likely get through some pieces of the training faster than someone who's never done the job, right? And so we train to standard, and when they meet the standard, we will set them out on solo patrol. So it's scheduled 16. Sometimes it goes longer, sometimes it's less, but
so
12
even
to
if
20 is probably the window.
Yeah. So even if you find somebody today, it's 10 months to get them on the street.
Fully solo patrol certified. Yeah, that's really one of the challenges, and it takes 2 weeks to resign. So right, that's the notice for the deputies, 10 working days.
Right.
So that is a challenge for us. We are, we're kicking around some ideas to accelerate some of that, which could include, some agencies, and I have a staff retreat tomorrow where we'll talk about this, but some agencies, they'll do a Zoom interview within a day or two of receiving your application. We'll just kind of do a pre-screening screening. Do we want you to come in and give you a really close look? And so you can kind of get rid of about half or a third of your candidates that way, right? And you can call them out more quickly that way. Perhaps. We haven't done that, and I haven't talked that through with HR yet, so I don't know how that's going to go over when I mention it, but
How much of that is within your purview and how much of that is directed by state statute? And by that, I mean the training.
the training is largely governed by state statute.
Okay.
And that is, one of the things, I think last week you had the legislators in, last week Monday, and my recollection was that you were going to advocate on our behalf for creating additional pathways to peace officer licensure. And I think that's important because some of the training that they learn in skills is the exact same training that they're going to have to do when they come to us in the first few weeks of employment. But we have to train them here. We can't rely on the school training because if there is lawsuit, they're not going to sue the school. It's up to the employer to make sure that their employees are trained to the employer's standard. So we could potentially partner with other agencies and run our own skills program and eliminate that redundancy in that. And that's, one of the things I'd like to see, but at the end of the day, Post has to make that happen.
Does that have to be designed by the agreed to or law created by the legislators in order for you to do that?
Right now, the Post Board outlines what all of the training curriculum are. And so you have to, meet the certain thresholds as articulated in their curriculum requirements.
Post Board, explain that.
That's Peace Officer Standards and Training Board. So they oversee all of our licensure.
And
and
like
so-
state board,
Pardon me?
like my state board. They
Yes.
rule over everything.
Yes. And so they outline what all the requirements are for each of the training topics. And we have to meet that standard. One of the things that they have in their requirements, though, is for skills, you have to have been to a regionally accredited school to be eligible to
Right.
earn those credits. And if you just eliminated that regionally accredited and said that Carver County could do it, here is our curriculum, here's the standard, which it mirrors the Post standard, and we wouldn't sign off on it if the employee didn't beat that.
Could they just make you accredited?
Well, the regional accreditation process, no, because that would be through they have their own body of what you would have to do to do that. But Post Board could say, theoretically, if you hit these thresholds and you do these things this way, we will give you the functional equivalent. And that's one of the ideas I'm pitching to Post. But I have no idea if that'll be readily embraced or if they'll shut me down.
How is the wage now compared to our neighbors for the police officers? Are we competitive, or are we just hanging in there?
I think we're competitive in normal conditions. We are not competitive today. The average deputy today makes $35.58 an hour. And they're leaving us for agencies that are starting them at $40, $41, $42 an hour.
Okay, so we need to fix that's, yeah,
Councilmember Black, other questions?
go ahead.
Councilmember Gunderson.
Back in September, you sent an email talking about 12 points that you were looking at changing. How many have you actually implemented in that email that you'd sent? Because I referenced some of that last week at our legislative meeting. One of the things was Victoria was losing the graphics on the car, and I haven't seen that car in around Victoria at all. So I'm just confused a little bit about where that's coming from. But I'd also like to know how many of these implementations you talked about doing you did, and then we can talk, and then we can get into the numbers, because the numbers that I'm trying to come up with on full-time patrol FTEs from the county's budget book, based on what was passed. You talked about 9 left policing, 5 to retirement, and 3 lateral movement, and you have 11.5. Did you hire 6 to replace the 17 and a half that left this year?
We have been in a state of hiring and coming and going
Right.
For decades,
Right.
sir.
No, I'm asking this year, how many FTEs do you have right now?
So
Right now, how many
right
FTEs?
this minute, 60 minus 11 and a half,
So 57.4 based on the 89.9.
mostly, yes.
Okay, great. And then,
So,
so we're left with a pretty sizable gap. So then we had to make these changes that we've talked about. And I'm asking how many of these changes that you sent over to Dana, so that we understand where our value is coming from and where our service is coming to our residents, so that they understand that when we get emails saying, I've seen a reduction in service, I'm not seeing the patrol car around it enough, we don't just go, I don't know.
that's
Now,
it.
and so, we need to know this information, how our service levels are being affected with this, non-emergency and emergency. I mean, if the non-emergency service call is somewhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours, to me, that's an unridiculous, that's too long. Non-emergency, if it's somewhere around what our fire is, that's great. But 2 hours to answer a non-emergency call, the ordinances that we have are what we have for a reason. If people are upset about something, from leaf burning to a level 3 predator moving into town, right? Mm-hmm. You're the teeth of our ordinances. Otherwise, we have no statutory ability to lay a fine on anybody or do any corrective behavior. We passed a whole bunch of, please maybe think about doing this, with no teeth. So how are we getting serviced that the non-emergency call time comes down? We get a good number of how many patrol officers we have and that we're covered and where our services are. Because if it does get to a point, we've discussed it, it gets frustrating for us to understand where our services are. Chaska has their own PD. Now we're in 40,000 people between Carver, Victoria, and Chan, roughly, estimated, I would say. And I would say, are we getting 28 of those? The 40,000 people are getting 28 of those FTEs. That's 40,000 is a little less than half of the county. So how many FTEs are we servicing the 28 full time with the expectation, Watertown, Norwood, Young America, Cologne, all the other communities that use your services, right? So that's where I'm at. And I guess it would just end with, I said what I said at an open meeting. If you've got anything to say to me, my phone number is listed on the city website. Please give me a call. Don't go through the mayor. Don't go through any other council members. You can come through me. So
So were there questions you
Yes.
were looking for me to answer, sir?
you've got 1 through 12.
Okay, you have me at a disadvantage. I don't
You sent
have-
the email.
And when did I write that? In September?
You should probably have it.
Councilmember Gunderson, if you have a question that you want to ask specifically, we have a few more minutes with the sheriff, so if you can maybe prioritize your questions.
Well, he can get back to me, because if he can't answer it, then that's fine. But September 8th, you sent an email detailing out changes or potential changes. I'm asking how many of those 12 were implemented and how many affect Victoria directly? And how are we going to move forward with getting our service levels back to expectation?
Well, as I outlined earlier, sir, I don't believe your service levels have fallen off.
Do you know if they've fallen off? You don't believe they've fallen off, but you laid out changes. So we're trying to compare where our service level is at.
Sure, and which data would you like? Would you like call response data?
I'd like the data on.
You have
I'd like
no
to
calls go on.
tell me what what changes you've made in the email that you laid out on changes you were going to make.
As I've stated, Mr. Gunderson, I don't have those 12 points in front of me. I can tell you that.
I'm happy to have that information come back in an email.
On the squad car one, you'll note that I wrote, we may remove
Right.
graphics. And I wrote that to say may deliberately so that people might understand that if we have to make some fleet adjustments, then we would have that adjustment. We did not do that.
The cars are still at the fire station?
You're still using your Victoria labeled car with the 4 deputies who are assigned to police Victoria.
Okay, so that
So-
that crosses one off.
And
Now,
so those
there are 11
bullets
more.
go to each of the cities who are differently situated. The city of Victoria is not impacted by this at the same level as a city like Watertown or Norwood Young America, because those cities don't have scheduled 24-hour coverage.
And I
So,
did see
but,
that.
but I'm happy to respond to that. I have the email, and I'm happy to provide a response to the city manager for distribution to each of you. I'm also happy if you want to ask me about them one at a time. I'm happy to respond to them here. I can let you know what's been done or not. It's entirely up to you. This is the city council meeting, not the Jason Cameron meeting. So,
Well, and we do have another agenda item to get to, so if you want to circle back with Dana on the answers to those questions for Councilmember Gunderson, that would be acceptable to you, sir? Good. All right, other final questions for Sheriff Cameron?
Are you going to be able to receive funds in order to be more competitive in your hiring from the county? Isn't the county the one that's divvying out the money?
it is. The County Board of Commissioners is the taxing authority, and how the collective bargaining agreement is negotiated between the union and the County Board of Commissioners. And so ultimately, it's up to the board. And we're continuing to have conversations to outline the situation that we're in, and I'm very confident that they will receive the information and make a reasonably informed decision. What that decision is, I don't know yet.
We don't have the report tonight for November, October, September. Usually there's a list of the calls you make and they're all listed out. Last month it wasn't listed. It was just generalized. Are you able to record those so that we get that report so we know where they are and what they're doing while they're on the clock with us?
Can we look at, are you asking, can we look at data pre-October 11th and compare to data October 11th to current date to look at response times and call volume and things of that nature?
Well, that would be fine, but I'm just saying we need, when we get your report, I look at it and it has how many calls you made and what they were for. Mm-hmm. But then at the end, there was a breakdown of all of the calls. And I didn't see it in the last report. I don't have this one yet for November. So I'm just trying to figure out, where are they? What are they doing? I mean, like my phone, I carry it around, it tells me everywhere I've been. So I'm just wondering, is that something that, a type of report that we can get?
You know, I think if it's a report you used to get, it's definitely a report you can still get. I'll have to check with the record supervisor who actually compiles the reports and sends them out to the cities. So
Okay.
she may have.
Because they record all that, right?
If it's in our records management system, we can get it out.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm sorry, Judy.
Yeah.
Because you talked about flexibility, and we're in unprecedented times, and we're working differently to try to meet our needs, right? And to be able to have that data, to be able to say, yes, this alternative plan is indeed meeting our expectations. Is that where you're trying to go?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I mean, I think that's a good idea, right? Because we are being flexible. We are, again, this is unprecedented times, but we need to be able to say at the end of the day, right, that 2 and 2 equals 4, and we're okay with that.
Yep, for sure. I'm happy to pull that data and put it together, and I will route that through the city manager for distribution.
That sounds great. On that note,
I just have one
Yes,
question.
Councilman
You talked about how more metro area, right, agencies are taking our deputies, right, because they can pay more. How are we recruiting? Are we looking to more outstate areas that I'm guessing would be paying less, you know, and then trying to get more people from that area coming to Carver County?
You know, fair question. And what we're finding out is the outstate cops probably went home, right? They went home to their agencies, the areas where they grew up, and they're not coming to Carver County. And, you know, of those deputies or cops who went, from the metro, they went to, say, McLeod County, and then we're looking to come back more metro. Well, turns out the municipal agencies are hiring those guys too. And so I talked with the sheriff in McLeod County, the sheriff in Wright County, Sibley County. We're all similarly situated in that their numbers would be different, but the proportions are probably pretty similar.
All right. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. All right. This was for discussion only. There's no action needed on that. So on that note, we'll move to our second workshop item, which is our quarterly city code cleanup project. Presenting this evening is our city clerk, Cindy Patnode, and Fire Chief Andrew Hager, and building official Scott McCarty. So we've got the trifecta here. So Ms. Patnode, why don't you start us off?
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. This takes a group effort, so it's just not us three either. There's other people that are involved in this, so thank you. The animal, we're just going to start out. You're familiar with what we're doing, and we have our different chapters we're working on this time. So the first chapter we're going through is the animals. And I've talked to the sheriff department about the leash law for dogs, and they're having a difficult time when it's under direct command control, when they're out like on the trail or if they get a call or something like that. So their recommendation would be to remove that language where it says under direct command control, and when it's off of your property, they should be in a leash. Is everybody in agreement with that? Because what we're going to do is take your recommendations and then bring back an ordinance in January sometime. So if you just want to give head nods, and then I can, or if you have questions. And I should also say, when we have these items, then we work with Attorney Vos, and we're on a phone call with him, and we go through all these things.
So just a quick question on this. So under direct command control, so now they have wireless leashes or those kinds of things. And so you can't tell.
I kept the sheriffs up here.
We should have. So you can't tell if they.
Yeah, I think they said that for being able to do a call, he said that it was difficult when they're not on a leash. So, I don't know.
Direct, if it's just a wireless,
Yeah, it's a zap.
That's like
direct
a
would
shot
be,
collar type training thing.
but I don't know.
So we're nodding yes. This is.
And if you have other questions, maybe Bob would be able to step in with.
Vos, do you have anything to add to that?
My understanding on this one was just that both the perception of the public around a dog owner or a pet owner, you know, it's important to see that the owner has the dog or the pet under control. And I think for enforcement purposes, we're led to understand that it would be difficult or maybe impossible to know as a police officer whether somebody has something other than a leash. So I think that was the purpose for the change.
Understood. All right, very good. Thank you.
The next one is declaration of nuisance. Oh, this is just in a section that it says that we require licenses, so it still is a cleanup.
I brought that up 3 years ago.
We're trying, Judy. So I'm assuming that's a head nod for everybody. Okay, and then the next part is chapter 14, and that goes into the fire prevention, and Andrew Hager, the chief, will be doing that part.
Chief, can you walk us through these?
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Council. A lot of this focuses, I'll call it on some legacy language that was developed in like the 70s that we're just, for the most part, eliminating. So sections 1421 through 1427 really kind of fell out of the scope of government that we operate in today, and maybe tied more back to that city administrator form. So we're just recommending deleting all of that language that's out there today, with the exception of 14-27. And that we just revise that language a little bit to follow the interstate mutual aid plan. So that's a statewide plan that kind of directs on how we respond to mutual aid requests throughout the state. So just some cleanup on that. The next sections here, several of them, all relate to.
Did they get a head
Oh,
nod?
sorry.
Did you guys nod your head?
Yes, we did.
All right.
Yeah. Bigger nods.
The next sections here all related to fire code enforcement. And what we found looking at this is it's all redundant through the state fire code, which we adopt through our code of ordinances already. So it was kind of having that language in two places. So we're proposing repeal the entire article, as that's all covered through the Minnesota State Fire Code. Sound good? This section, we're just looking at updating a couple of definitions. Oops, sorry.
Can we go back? When you say it's covered by the state, we would have that documented. So if somebody's trying to look at it, and we would refer them to that code.
A link in there?
A link or somewhere that's pointing them to. I don't know, maybe that's not the right verbiage, but I think you kind of get where I'm going.
Yeah, I definitely do. So
The state fire code.
our code of ordinances today just says we adopt the most recent version of the Minnesota State Fire Code. We don't necessarily link directly to that. And I don't know, I guess that'd be more of a question for Cindy if that's something we could do, or.
Yeah, I think we could. I don't know, Bob, how we would phrase that, but we could work on that to just get the link. Because were you guys able to click on the links and it would put you to the state statute or the city code? If you looked at this at work, ouch. So I think we could do that, have a link in our city code book, because we do that to other state statutes.
Right.
I don't know where, is this a state statute or is it?
It's a state fire code, so yeah, I mean.
State fire
Get
code.
onto it.
It's somewhere
Yep.
in the world to link to.
Yep, we can get it.
Yeah, I've been on that site. There's a lot of information on it.
Councilmember Hebert, does that answer?
Yes,
So
sorry to interrupt.
maybe we repeal it with just, or we'll have to work on the wording to figure out how to keep that language in. Okay.
Perfect, thank you. So then, this section, again, we were just updating some definitions to align with the state fire code, just so they weren't conflicting, so.
It's in 1494.
1494, correct. Look good? All right. We cleaned up our open burning section a little bit and just clarified what can be used for burning, and updated that language to kind of standard practices, and specifically included in our ordinance that you can't burn leaves. That's been an ongoing issue that we continue to see, and it wasn't specifically called out in ordinance, so we specifically put that in there for this section, so.
Okay.
Good? All right. Again, just kind of changing here how we make some notifications for burning permits. Previously, the sheriff's department was required to be notified. We're changing that to the fire department, so just updating our language to reflect current practice again.
Do people mostly come to you, or are they still going to the the sheriff's department?
All burn permits come through City Hall here directly from me.
Okay, so even though our ordinance says go to the sheriff, everybody's still coming to you?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. And let's clean that up, yeah.
Perfect. And then these couple of sections, again, we were just looking, the language was kind of outdated, so we were just updating a couple of real minor terms in both of those. This next two sections were just around service fees, and we updated a couple of things. We bill for false fire alarms and some other incidents, have the ability to bill for vehicle accidents. We're going to add technical rescue to that as well. So just allows us, if we need to recover some costs associated with an incident, the ability to do so is included in that.
What's a technical rescue?
Like a large scale confined space type incident, like grain bins.
Oh.
Very popular outstate, but fortunately we don't have a lot of those here, but that would be something that could be billed for. So.
Great, yep.
And then one of our recommendations, again, around billing is there was an exemption in there that excluded all nonprofits from billing. So we are looking at making the recommendation to remove that the billing ordinance applied to everybody within the community. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. All right, that's all I've got. I think Cindy's going to take Park and Rec.
Yep. And then those two name tags on that table can be moved off of there if somebody wants to sit at the table, if any of you developers want to.
The front pew is available.
Okay, the next part is the Parks and Rec Department, and this was with Ann Monkey, the director there. She said there's been more horses are becoming popular for special events, and right now they're not allowed in the parks, but she said that she would allow them with a special permit, so if that's agreeable to the city council.
Yes.
Okay. And then the next one is utilities and their prohibited discharges, and this is, they would like, the sump pumps are draining onto city streets, which cause issues, so the Public Works is asking when available, the drain tile is required to be connected to the city's drain tile system. That goes to the stormwater. And if you have any questions, Kara's here to help.
Cares what?
Kara's here to help answer if you have any
With
questions.
the sump pump,
Draining into the city streets, and when available, they want them connected to the city's drain tile system. Who's in charge? Who does that? The homeowner?
how does that?
Hi, Kara. Come on up.
Mine running out to the backyard.
Good evening, Mayor,
Somebody
members of City
arrest
Council.
her.
So if the drain tile system is installed in the street, all of our new homes are connected to it. That's in a different part of the code that requires it. I think this section they're referring to when a sump pump is draining to a street and causing an issue and there's a connection available, we want to help those homeowners connect. But it would be the homeowner who would make the connection. In most cases, there's already a stub available because we've reconstructed all the streets in the city to include the drain tile system. So it doesn't come up very often, and usually they're happy to try to work with us to get connected because it used to be a much bigger problem, and you'd have like green slime all summer in the road and then ice in those areas. And it does cause the road to deteriorate prematurely.
Okay, very good, then yes.
Yeah, and the ones that are in the backyard can stay in the backyard. It's just for the ones that are going out to the street.
Oh, okay, good.
Anybody? You still have a question?
I was just going to say, my neighborhood is that neighborhood that still has sumps draining out into culverts and ditches and things. There's no one direction that they're aimed. Give you an example. One comes out, ours goes out down into the culvert. The neighbor behind me has hers shooting out into her backyard. And so do we want them all to try to get towards the storm drain? How do you want?
So.
Or do you want it to
On
kind
the
of be
ground
left
is
to
good.
each of the, I mean, we're the only 50-year-old neighborhood, right? So
Councilmember Gunderson, we are just mostly concerned with the ones that are causing a nuisance in the street. So we used to use some nuisance language to try to address this with folks, but it's not as clear as this would be. But ones flowing to green space can be a problem for neighbors, but we only address the ones that are causing a problem in the street.
okay, wonderful.
Great, thank you. All right.
Okay, and now the next part is the building inspector. So Scott McCarty will be up here.
Mr. McCarty,
Sorry, Scott.
playing the part of Steve McCarty is, all right.
I don't have a name badge on. Do you want me to take these?
No, very good.
You're not going to read that book, are you?
Chapter 1. Yeah, so similar to Andrew's section, we're just trying to clean up outdated language. So the first section was labeled application, administration, and enforcement, where the administration of the code is actually a chapter of the code, so we take out administration. They had statements of through Building Codes and Standards Unit, which is now Construction Codes and Licensing Division. So those kinds of changes.
Okay,
Are we good there?
yes.
All right, so similar here. It referenced the Uniform Building Code, which we haven't used since early 2000s. We're now the State Building Code.
Okay.
So
Right.
simply making that change. 103.22. So this talks about denial of a permit, and used to give some pretty significant power to the building inspector and to Cindy the clerk, where they could deny a building permit. And there's 3 criteria, which now the way the codes are written, those criteria fall within those different code sections. So if there's a requirement that doesn't allow you to do something, then it's going to come through the code, not the ordinance language.
Okay. This one said that, okay, it's spelled out in the building code, so we're just going to get rid of this section
Yeah,
completely. Okay,
yeah.
agreeable to that. Everybody good with that?
Okay.
Okay.
certificate of occupancy section. So again, some of the language talked about a fee schedule as established by City Council resolution. I'd just like to change to have it state appropriate for the project per the current fee schedule adopted by City Council.
Yes.
And then there's a section on certificate of grading, which we don't call it certificate of grading, we call it an as-built survey or grading survey. So just changing that language.
Okay.
And 52, I
Plumbing,
think this is the section that Kara was talking about.
plumbing code,
Oh, no.
or where, yeah, the plumbing code is 103
Okay.
article.
Yeah, so within the ordinance language, you know, if you looked at the beginning, we had sections for plumbing code, we had sections for electrical code. Back in those days, those were different boards, right? They'd adopt their own code, and then we'd have to reference that separately. The way it's structured now, excuse me, is the plumbing code is under the Department of Labor and Industry, the same people that adopt the building code. So it's just another chapter of the building code, as is the electrical. So we're just gonna eliminate the plumbing code language, but we're gonna tweak the electrical just a little bit. If you guys remember when the state shut down, was that in 2010, I think?
Oh, because they ran out of money? Or didn't run out of money, the budget passed?
Right.
Yes.
So we utilize the state electrical inspectors. And when the state shut down, they're not doing electrical inspections. So cities had to scramble and find another means to provide those electrical inspections so people could keep progressing on their permits. So we're eliminating the language that talks about adoption of that code, because again, it's another chapter within the state building code, but we're going to keep language that says the city may provide for inspections of all electrical installations pursuant to statute. And so we'll have that flexibility. If in fact the state does shut down again, we can have that as a safety net.
Yes.
Okay. And I think that
Yep.
is it. There's 83. That was the inspection piece that we're going to keep.
And that is all of that.
Yep, so then I'll make that into the ordinance. I did submit the ordinance there, but we'll tweak it to the different things that we talked about tonight, and then it'll be on a consent agenda item then in the January meeting.
Okay, very good. Mr. Vos, anything from you on this? I trust you've read this compelling.
I have, Mayor, and I don't want to make light of it. It's an important thing that you're going through, and you have these quarterly updates. I guess I would have characterized most of what we talked about here tonight, though, as being really truly technical updates. Both the fire code and the building code are really kind of self-effectuating codes now. They've got provisions for enforcement, et cetera, administration, and we're just simply deferring now to those existing code provisions. Probably the most important policy decision you make here, I don't want to laugh about it, but it was the dog leash issue. It's actually a fundamental policy change that you've made there, but otherwise you're not changing your policies, you're just cleaning up your code.
All right, very good. Thank you so much. All right. Ms. Patino, do you have everything you need from us? All right, with that, there are no more items to come before the council in the workshop tonight, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
And a second, please.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Give us 2 minutes. We're going to flip the cameras around to get ready to do our